Hi everyone, Ryan Adams here. I am a Senior Premier Field Engineer for Microsoft, and today I want to talk to you about syncing logins and jobs in SQL Server. And we first had this issue arise when mirroring came out back in SQL Server 2005, because mirroring and availability groups both are based at the database level. And so anything at the server level, logins, jobs, linked servers, and those types of things, they don't come across. Well, when we do a failover and the worst happens, I need to make sure that everything's running. It doesn't do me any good to have a failover and none of my logins exist. So what we need to do is make sure that we can get those from point A to point B. That way when we have a failover, everybody can log in, jobs still run, link servers still work, all that kind of good stuff. So we want to talk about the different methods that we can do to solve that. So if you're looking at my blog post, this video through there, you're going to see all this stuff. If you're going through YouTube to see this video, make sure you go out to ryanjadams.go/agsync. And I'll put that down here at the bottom for you. And I'll give you a couple reminders as we go on that URL so you can go look at it, where I've kind of documented just some generic methods of ways that we can do things, some links to some more information that you can do if you want to pursue some of the other methods. One method is provided by Microsoft to store procedures called SP-help-rev login. It's actually two stored procs. There's another one that does a hexadecimal convert in order to take care of hash passwords and SIDs for the SQL logins themselves. And so if you go to the blog post, I've got a little bit of stuff written there on it and a link to where you can go get that. It works fine. The only problem is that it's not really easy to automate, and it wasn't designed to be automated. It was designed for a one-time, I'm trying to get all of my logins to match and create anything that's missing. So it was really only designed as a runtime. You can automate it, but there are better methods we're going to talk about. SSIS also has a way that you can sync logins. So there's actually something there on your control flow that you can use, and we can actually use that to sync all of our logins. That would be method 2. Method 3 is another stored procedure. So I referenced mirroring earlier. It came out in SQL Server 2005, and we can mirror one database to another. So Robert Davis wrote a really great book on mirroring back when it came out in SQL Server 2005. And he had a script in there that would sync logins that came as part of the materials with the book. And I went and looked at it and used it, tested it out, but it only handled Windows logins. So I decided to go write my own. And I was almost done, but I was having a little bit of a hard time figuring out how to handle the hash passwords. So I emailed Robert and I said, hey, is this something you might be able to help me figure out how we could do this, since your script doesn't handle that and do the SQL users, it only does Windows? And he goes, what are you talking about? Mine does do that. It does all of that. In fact, it does roles and everything. And we found out that the publisher did not publish the final version of the script that contained everything. And so he wrote a blog post. I've got a link to his blog post in mine, if you're here on my blog looking at that, so that you can go out there and grab the full code of his. Now, his stored procedure does use link servers. So if that's something that's not okay in your environment, that's something to keep in mind. Some environments just don't allow the use of link servers. I've seen some environments that they prefer not to use link servers, but you're only using this to sync logins, right? We're not moving data or anything like that in any major queries. We're just moving the login, so it's very quick and simple. But they'd rather not have them hanging out there. So I've worked with some people where we've deployed this, and we've gone in and created a job step that creates the link server. Second job step will go in and actually do the sync of the logins, and then the third one will go back and take the link server back out and remove it. Just another option there for you. So our fourth option would be contained databases. We'll use a contained database or a partially contained database. We can get rid of the logins, we move the logins, and we move all that security into the database itself. So that would handle that. And keep in mind that so far we're just talking about logins, right? And all these methods that I have mentioned at this point, these other 4 methods, are nothing more than logins. As does you no good for anything else like jobs, link servers, or anything else that you have at the server level that, certs, those types of things, it doesn't do you any good for that. So my last method here is going to be a tool called Dba Tools .io. So here's the website. You can go out there and check this out. And so Chrissy Lemaire wrote all these wonderful PowerShell commandlets. I made it a special point to thank her for that at the last MVP Summit last year because, boys, it made my life easier, and I guarantee it's going to make your life easier. She wrote this as a migration utility. So the idea was that she wanted to be able to migrate SQL servers onto newer platforms. How could we automate this? And that's the way that she designed it. But of course, this plays in perfectly because that's essentially what we're doing is migrating logins and jobs from one to another. So it works out perfectly in this scenario for syncing logins, jobs, and those types of things. So when you get to her website, you can click download up here at the top or down there at the bottom, either way, and this will go through some installation stuff. And this is how you actually need to go in and install things. And then you can also click on Command Index up here, and this will break down all of the commands. And we're only going to focus on a couple of those today. We're going to be looking at this guy here, Copy SQL Job, and we're also going to be looking at one called Sync. Let's see, where Security Copy SQL Login. We're going to take a look at that. And there is a Sync SQL Login that is also in here that we will be using today. So this is a really great documentation. You just take a look at all the commands. There's tons of commands in here. Just awesome stuff that you can do. She did an amazing job with this. And she's constantly keeping it up to date and adding things. So if you run into something, let her know. If there's something you don't see, let her know. I'm sure she would be excited to take a look at that and add that into her catalog of greatness here. So thank you, Chrissy, for writing all this stuff. It makes everybody's life a whole lot easier. So let me show you that this is my favorite method, how we can do this. And I've found two different ways to do this. And I want to show them both to you so that you can have the choice to pick which one is the best method for you. So the first method is, let's just create a SQL agent job. If I want to use these tools, I want to do a SQL agent job, how can I write a SQL agent job to sync and copy my logins? Now, of course, you have to install Dba Tools IO. Now, you need to install this on every replica. So the assumption here is that we're working in availability group. My demo environment has 3 nodes, Node 1, Node 2, and Node 3, all sitting in availability group. And there's 3 databases in that AG. We have to install Dba Tools.io on all 3 replicas. When you do that, the easiest method is to just do this. If you've got access to the internet so you can pull it out of PowerShell, we can just do install dash module Dba Tools. If we've got access, then we can go pull that out of the repository and install it that way. So you got to do this from an elevated PowerShell, but we can do that. That's the easiest way to install it. That should install it for all users on your system. If that doesn't work, this is the other method I found that works the second best for me, is the invoke expression, passing it in the GitHub URL in order to pull that down. If you do this one, though, and of course, her website's got all these things documented better than I do here. So for the installation, I'd definitely refer you to her website there on the installation methods. This one here will only install it for the user that you're running this as. So I'm logged in as Ryan.Adams here. It's only going to install it in my profile. But for a SQL agent job, that's not going to do us any good because it's not going to run on my profile. So what we need to do is get it into the profile that SQL agent's going to run under. Now, if we create an agent job and we just set it the way that it is without giving it anything additional or using any proxies, it'll be whatever your SQL agent service account's running under. Copy it from your profile, so users, whatever your profile is, documents, Windows PowerShell modules, you'll find the Dba Tools folder in the modules folder. So copy the entire Dba Tools folder over to the SQL agent profile into his documents, Windows PowerShell modules. That's great for getting into agent. Obviously, if you're using a proxy, again, you'd have to put this in the proxy profile. If you put it in C Windows System 32, I found that to be a little bit easier. That allows access to all users on the system. You may or may not want to give it access to these modules. You might not want to do that for all users. but I've found that to be the easiest method if we do that. So just copy it into C Windows System 32, Windows PowerShell, v1.0/modules. So once you get that installed, we get it installed on all 3 nodes. Remember that because we've got 3 nodes running here, we're going to have to duplicate this job. So we want this job to sync the logins, but it needs to be running on all 3 nodes. But if only one of them can be primary, then what we really want is for it to successfully run on the primary, but on the other 2 secondaries, we want it to exit gracefully. We want it to know that, hey, this isn't the primary, so we don't want you to actually run on here. We only want this to run on the primary. So we have to duplicate the job, and the job has to be able to detect whether it's actually the primary or not. And so that's what this job's going to do. A couple other notes here, obviously in the script, which I will provide on the blog post. So again, I'll put that down here at the bottom, ryanjadams.com/go/agsync. And that will take you to the blog post, and I'll have all this code available out there. So you're going to need to change your target database, your source and destination instances. I'll show you where that is here in the code. The other thing is the job needs to run under sysadmin on all replicas. So if you're using proxy account, SQL agent service account, whatever that is, make sure it's a sysadmin on all of your replicas for this to work. So I'm using SQL command mode. Let me turn that on here because I need to create this job on all 3 nodes. So we'll start off with node 1, and he's currently the primary right now. Now the first thing I need to do is I need to be able to determine is he a primary replica or not. And I'm going to do that using this function. Now this function, fnhajdr is primary replica, exists already on SQL Server 2014 and 2016. It did not exist in SQL Server 2012. So you notice here I'm doing a version check. And I'm saying if it equals 11, if it is SQL Server 2012, then I'm going to go ahead and create this function because it doesn't exist. If we're not running 2012, because AGs didn't exist prior to that, then we don't really care about anything lower than that, and anything above already had this in existence. Only on 2012 would we run this. If it's not 2012, then we don't create this stored procedure. Again, no point in reinventing the wheel if somebody's already done it. As it turns out, Patrick Kiesler, I found this out there, he wrote this a few years ago, patrickkiesler.com, and this will go out and determine whether this is a primary replica or not. And it's very, very simple. We're just joining sys databases with DMHADR availability replica states in order to determine if this is the primary or not. So the first thing we'll do is we'll execute that. We'll get that to run and get that stored procedure out there in case we need that if it happens to be SQL Server 2012. Obviously, we don't if it is higher than that. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to create an operator. So for me, you're going to go ahead and change this. I have to change the operator name from DBA and the email address here from dbamycompany.com. No point in having a job if I'm not going to get notified that it failed. So although this isn't required, I highly suggest that you create an operator here and set up a notification that this job failed. Go ahead and notify this operator so we can get that resolved. I am going to create a category here for availability group sync, right? Because we may have jobs. We're going to do one now for syncing logins, but we may want to come back later and add stuff for how do I automate syncing jobs for my other agent jobs or link servers or those types of things. So that way we can kind of put them all in the same category here. So I just created it called availability group sync. We're going to create the job. We're going to call it copy and sync logins. Give it a good description of what it's going to do. Assign it the category we previously assigned, availability group sync. Putting my owner login as SA. General best practice here or suggested practice, what I always tend to do is the SA account is a well-known system administrative account. Disable this account because it is very highly known and easy to attack. Disable it. I set the login here to that account even though it's disabled so that the job is not going out to Active Directory trying to find some user in Active Directory. I'd rather use a local SQL Server account. Now, if you're curious about the reason behind that, you can do a search for Kerberos on my blog post or on my blog, and you'll find a post out there about the reason why. And I'll give you a hint. It is because the owner login has absolutely nothing to do with the security context under which SQL agent jobs run. So if you're interested in that, go check that out on my blog as well. Notify the email operator we created earlier. Now we've got the job created, we're going to create the steps, right? And so we've got a few steps, and we know that the very first step is we've got to find out whether this is the primary or not, because we only want it to run on the primary, and if it's not the primary, then we want it to exit out gracefully. So I'm not going to step through all the specifics of all, the success and action stuff, because I'm actually going to open the job and show you that in the job. But all we're really doing is creating this. We're going to go check the FNHADR is primary replica. App1, AG1, DB1 happens to be in my database. If it's not equal to 1, then I'm going to go ahead and raise an error, meaning it's not the primary. Raise an error. My message is node is not primary. The error is raised to exit the job gracefully. This error can be safely ignored. And when I open up the job here in a minute, I'll show you why I've done that and why I've raised an error here if it's not the primary. Next job step, we go in and do a copy. So if I'm on node 1 and I've got 3 nodes, that means I need to copy my logins from node 1 to node 2. I also need to copy them from node 1 to node 3. Now the copy, when we do this, only does a copy of logins that doesn't exist already. If they do exist, then that's a sync, and that's a different command that was in our PowerShell commandlet that we downloaded from Dba Tools I/O. So this one, if we look at the command, running PowerShell, passing it the command we're passing it here is this, and look how simple and easy this is. Copy SQL login, the source is node 1, the destination is node 2. It's that simple to run these command modules that Chrissy wrote. That'll take anything on node 1 that doesn't exist in node 2, go ahead and copy that over to node 2 and create it on that so that all my logins match. Now that copies them, but that doesn't sync the ones that already exist. So we're going to do it again. This looks exactly the same, but I'm going to do a sync. And this will sync everything, right? So if you've added a role, you've granted it permissions to a server role or a database role, removed one, it's going to match and sync all of that. With this one, the commandlet that we're going to use is sync SQL login permissions. Again, source of node 1, destination of node 2. So now what we've done is we've created a job step that's going to copy from 1 to 2, a job step that's going to sync from 1 to 2. Now we also need to do that from 1 to 3. So again, this is exactly the same thing, except that we're just doing a copy from 1 to 3. So we're just changing the source and destination down here in our command. We're going to do a sync from 1 to 3. Again, changing the command to have the source and destination different from 1 to 3. Here, I'm just going to give it a schedule. It's going to run every day at 7 p.m. If you use the code, you can obviously change that. And then adding the job. And then, of course, I've got to go do this on node 2, right? I've got to do the exact same thing on node 2. Obviously, I'm going to change my sources and destinations on all the job steps. I've got to run that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and run this. This is going to create the jobs on node 1, 2, and 3. So it's already done that. Let's go in and inspect the job. So as you can see here, looking at my jobs, there's nothing here other than the default syspolicy purge history. We're going to do a refresh. There's my copy and sync logins job. Let's take a look at this. So nothing really revolutionary here other than the name. I told you earlier that I assigned it the owner of SA. We did give it a category of availability group sync. And of course, as always, give it a good description so we know what it does. But the steps are where things get a little interesting. So let me slide this over so we can see that a little bit better. So what we're really going to notice here is the very first step where we verify the primary, if this is a primary replica or not. This is where things get a little interesting. And the reason they get interesting is because of what I've chosen here for the on failure. So what I've told it is I said, hey, if this fails, this step, quit the job, but report it as a success as opposed to a failure. So you remember that when we wrote that job step, we raised an error. If it's not a primary, if it happens to be a secondary, we're raising an error. That was the only way that we could get here in agent as a job step in order to get it to quit and not proceed further to the other steps. That's the only way we're going to be able to do that, is to raise an error and tell it, hey, look, if you see this error, go ahead and quit the job, but go ahead and report that as a success. Why a success? because that's by design. I want this thing to fail. If it's not the primary, I want the job to fail. I don't want an email or a page or a text on my phone saying that this job failed because it was by design. So we're going to go ahead and quit that, but report as success. That way we're not running the rest of the steps and we're not getting paged. That is the only negative that I've seen to this method, is the fact that we're raising errors. It's just not as clean as what I would have hoped it to be. And the rest of this, of course, your copy from 1 to 2, your sync from 1 to 2, copy 1 to 3, sync 1 to 3, giving it a schedule to run every day at 7 p.m. It's supposed to notify the DBA if it happens to fail. So let's go test this thing out and see what happens. So let's create a new user. I'm here on node 1. We're going to go in here. Let's just create a new dummy user in here. We're just going to call him AG Sync. We'll make him a SQL authenticated user. Windows users are super easy to sync because the password and SID is all stored in Active Directory. There's really not much to do there if you were going to write this and do this yourself. SQL Server users are a little bit different because we've got a SID and we've got a password that's stored in SQL Server as hashed values. And so that stuff all has to come across. So let's use a SQL Server authenticated account. I'm going to go into server roles. I'm not going to give it a server role, but let's give it a user mapping. So let's map it into one of our databases. This database happens to be in my availability group. He's the first database. Let's go ahead and add a data reader, data writer role. So we're going to add him to those two roles, data reader and data writer. That way we can see that not only has it synced the login, but it has also synced the fact that he's a part of a couple of roles. And that is in my app1 AGDB1 database. So we'll go ahead and click OK. We'll create that guy. Here he is. Here's my AG Sync. Now, if I go down here to node 2, just to prove and show, here's my logins, refresh it. The AG Sync would have been right here alphabetically, and he's not going to be here on node 2. Same for node 3. So let's go ahead and run our job here on node 1. Go ahead and start the job. We're going to click Start, let that guy run, and then he's going to go through and he's going to do a copy and sync. Now, this doesn't take a whole lot of time to run. It's fairly quick here, just a few more seconds, and it should be done. And then what we'll do is we're going to inspect the history of the job. Because what's really nice about this is the full output of exactly what the commandlet does gets stored in the agent job history, which I really, really like. So I can go in and inspect that and find out exactly on that run of the job, exactly what did it do. Did it see that, hey, this particular account already existed, so we skipped it? Did it have to do, addition of this particular job or login, and that kind of stuff. And then what we'll also do is we'll go run it on the secondary. Because what we want to do is make sure that it's going to quit gracefully, not go sending me pages and raising crazy errors and alerts and all that kind of good stuff. I don't want that to happen on the secondary. And it runs super fast, of course, on a secondary because we're raising that alert right there in the very first job step. So it actually errors out very quickly. So this is finally done. So let's see if it actually did what we wanted it to do. So first of all, let's just go do a view history here. So we'll kind of expand this out. Let's take a look at some of the details. And of course, got quite a few steps. The very first step was to verify. Let's expand this up a little bit so we can see what was going on. There's not much to see here. It succeeded. Whoop-de-doo. Nothing special there. Job step 2 was a copy. And so down here, we can actually see everything that it did, which is really cool. So I can see, hey, look, the Americans, that's my domain name is Americans, Ryan.abs account, it already exists in the destination. You'll notice here it says use -force to drop and recreate. So if we were to go back in, change our job step, put a -force at the end of our command, when we call a commandlet, it's telling us that it will actually drop and recreate that. So if we want to do that, that's an option that we have available to us. There's quite a few of these that it's going to skip because these are all local machines, right? So this is all local to the machine name, so it's going to skip all of those. So let's scroll down a little further, and where is that AG Sync one? Right here. So we can see here all of this is that new AG Sync account that we created. So it starts off, says, hey, look, I'm attempting to add it, setting the SID to the source, setting its language to English. The default database was master we're going to set. I successfully added that to node 2 and performed a grant to SQL so that it has the permissions to log in. Pretty cool, right? So let's see if it really worked. And we can go through the rest of these job steps, right? Once you guys sync and deploy this, I'll let you guys walk all the job steps. But I just wanted to show you that it does do the full output of everything that it does right here in a job step, which I really like. So let's go see if that really and truly works. So let me do a refresh here. Sure enough, there's my AG Sync account. Let's open them up and make sure that it actually handled everything else. Look, the passwords are automatically filled in for us. We did not add it to any server roles, but we did do a user mapping. Sure enough, taking a look here at this database, it has granted it into the database data reader and data writer role, which is exactly what we gave it earlier. Of course, it would have performed that exact same job step. If we've gone looked at job step, it's going to add that down here on server node 3 as well. So that way we get everything synced. So that's pretty cool. But let's also do this. Let me refresh my job here on node 2. But let's run this job and see what happens. Again, runs very, very quickly. We expect that because he's not primary, he's a secondary node, he's read-only. Let's go take a look at the history of this job, though, and see what it looks like. So the good news is you'll see that we've got this yellow exclamation mark here, and it says the job succeeded, which means that it didn't send an alert out. There was no notification that it would have sent to me here, which is great. I don't want it to notify me because I want it to fail. I expected it to. That was by design. But I will say the failure on the actual job step itself. And we would expect that, right, because we actually raised the error. And that's why I put the text in the error, because if we look at it, this is exactly what we put in there, right? This node is not the primary. The error was raised to exit the job gracefully. This error can be safely ignored, right? So we wrote that in there so we could raise that specific error. So we know that this was by design. And of course, you can change that to whatever you want that message to say. But we didn't notify. We did exit gracefully. Now, I say gracefully, but of course, it's not always pretty to open up your job history and see a bunch of yellow exclamation marks in here. So it's not the cleanest particular way to do this on the face of the planet, but it absolutely works. So then the next question is well, is there a cleaner way to do that? And so I did find a better way to do this. The other way is we've done this here in SQL Server. We don't actually have to do this in SQL Server. What we could have done is we could have actually done this as a scheduled task, right? So if I go take a look at my task scheduler here in the operating system, we can create a job that will run this for us. So I've got my job here. If I open the job up, we take a look at him, and here's the action he's going to do. It won't let me stretch that out any further. So what we're saying is, I want you to do PowerShell and run the copy sync task.ps1 file. Now what's nice about running this out of the operating system is I'm going to go show you the code here for the PS1. Again, if you're on ryanjadams.com/go/agsync, then you're going to be able to go out and grab all of this code for yourself. Let me show you what it looks like and what it does, and what I really like about this particular method. So here's the code. It's actually quite simple. We import our SQL PS, SQL PowerShell modules. We're going to set a variable to the name of the availability group. We're going to go grab SMO server object, and then the AG primary is going to be our server availability groups, passing the AG name database replica states, and then we're going to say where the replica role equals primary, select the availability replica server name. So what we're doing here is we're getting the primary or replica server name and putting it in the AG primary variable. If you want a couple write hosts in here just to write those variables out so that you can see how we're doing this comparison. Because what I'm going to do is, now that I've figured out, looking at the availability group, who the primary is, I want to compare that to the local computer name using my environment variable computer name and see if they match. If they match, then that means that this job is running on the primary. If they don't match, then I'm on a secondary, right? So if the AG primary equals my local computer name, then do all of this. Otherwise, we exit. So the nice thing about this is we're not going to go in and see the warnings and error messages like we saw running it as a SQL Server agent account. This thing will just run and there won't be any errors because it's going to gracefully exit, right? If it's not the primary, we just quit. Simple as that. And we're not raising any errors or anything like that. So that's really nice. If it is the primary, then we do exactly the commands that you saw that we did in the job, right? Copy SQL login, the source is 1, destination is 2. Do a sync from 1 to 2. Do a copy from 1 to 3. Do a sync from 1 to 3. Simple as that. We run this and it takes care of it. So that's a much better way to do this. It's a little bit cleaner. The only negative that I see to this method is if you have another DBA come behind you or another coworker and he's wondering whether you're syncing the logins in this environment, he's not going to be able to easily go in to Management Studio, look at my jobs and go, oh, hey, look, there's one called copy and sync logins. That's what I need to look at. Clearly, this guy is the one that's copying and syncing logins. It's probably happening, right? So it's not clear that that's occurring because you don't see it inside Management Studio. You don't see it inside a SQL Server. It's running externally. But it's a little bit cleaner in the fact that we're not having to raise an error and all that kind of good stuff that we looked at with the agent job. So last thing I'll show you here is how we can do this with jobs too, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to open up, I've got something here. What this is going to do is this is just going to create a job that's going to run a DBCC check on every database. It's going to do a single job and one job step to do DBCCs against all of them. So if I refresh my jobs here, I see, oh, I might have run that on the wrong server. Which one did that guy run on? He ran on Node 2. Let's go ahead and change that. Our connection, change connection. Let's change him over to Node 1. I guess I had the wrong one highlighted. And then let's go create this job on Node 1. Okay, so now if I refresh here, I will see that he is here, all DBs, DBCC. Now I accidentally created him here on server 2. So let me refresh and delete the job off server 2. Okay, so he's not on server 2, he's not on server 3. He just exists here. Simple job. All he did is dynamically go and take a look at all the databases, create a job step to run a DBCC on every database that I see here in this particular instance. That's all he's doing. So what I wanted to do, of course, was, well, I want to copy that job over, right? How can I copy this job from Node 1 to Node 3? So you've seen the two different methods, and the method doesn't change. Whether you do this as an agent job or you do this in the operating system, the method's exactly the same. Copy the code. The only difference is we're going to use a different commandlet this time. And the commandlet that we're going to use here is the copy SQL job. Tell it the source is Node 1, the destination is Node 2. Hey, if I wanted to go on to Node 3, all we need to do is copy paste this guy and say go from 1 to 3. So if I run this, this should go out there, take any job that's on the source of Node 1. If it doesn't exist on Node 2, it's going to go create it over on Node 2. When it's done doing that, it's going to move and it's going to go do that from 1 to 3 for anything that doesn't exist. So you can actually take a look at all the output down here and everything that it's doing. It is finished. So let me go in and take a look at Management Studio. Let's come down here to Node 2. Let's refresh. And here's my all DBs DBCC. Open it up, make sure all my job steps look the way they did on the other one. Sure enough, they are. Check all of my databases here. If I were to go down to server 3, refresh him, we'll see. Remember, we created the copy sync logins job on here too, and then here's the DBCC. job, and all of his steps. So it successfully migrated that job from server 1 to server 3. So you can see how easy it is to do these migrations with the Dba Tools.io, and it's far more flexible. Again, there's those other methods there that we can use. They only copy logins, though. They don't do us any good for anything else like jobs and link servers. And remember, you can always go to Dba Tools.io, and there's a ton of stuff that you can do out here, including, I've used logins, jobs, and link servers as example, but there's other ones. We can do certificates, and there's all kinds of cool stuff over here, right? Maybe you're using Query Store, and you wanted the same configuration that you had on server 1 to be over on server 2. Cool, we can do that. Tons of awesome stuff out here in order to keep things in sync and match them. And this is super handy for mirroring and availability groups. So anytime we're using those, this is a huge, huge tool to have in your back pocket. So go use it, go play with it. You'll thank me for it, but don't waste your time thanking me. Thank Chrissy for writing this. She's out on Twitter. Hit her up on Twitter. Send her an email on here. She would definitely appreciate knowing that what she's done here has been huge for the SQL Server community. Super handy stuff, and it's really, really great things to use. So again, link I'll throw down here at the bottom for the blog post in case you're watching this directly on YouTube, ryanjadams.com/go/agsync. Will get you to my blog post where you can see all the other methods. You can pull down the code, and of course this video will be embedded. So thank you guys for taking the time to watch this. I hope you find this useful. I hope you have a lot of success with this. I've had a lot of success with customers and clients with this, so I hope you will too, and we shall see you next time.